What is going on, Panthers Nation? I am excited for today's show. It's monumental, it's huge. I have never done this. Today, we bring on a guest to the show. I don't even know if this is real. We got our man, Alex Zietlow, writer, beat reporter for the Carolina Panthers that writes for the Charlotte Observer on the show today. What is going on, Panthers Nation? Carolina Dad here, your host of the Two Growls One Roar podcast. We have a very special guest today, Alex Zietlow of the Charlotte Observer. He is the first guest on the podcast. He's been so gracious to come on, talk about all the things that have been happening in Panthers world over the last week. I thought it'd be the perfect time to start bringing on guests. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Hey, I appreciate you, man. This will be fun. Hey, we have something to talk about? What's going on?
Right? All the headlines coming through. So I thought with OTAs wrapping up, we could start talking about OTAs. I think as fans, we latch on to the tweets, we latch on to everything that comes through, the articles that are published that y'all put out. I'm curious, and I did get to hear you on Locked On podcast, give your thoughts on OTAs, at least through, I guess, last week, this week. But with it wrapping up, is there anything that we should be concerned about? Any news? I know there's a lot of things that we're making news out of, but with you being there, what's going on with OTAs?
Well, there are a whole bunch of things going on in OTAs. Unfortunately, and as I've said on, like you mentioned, in other platforms, not a ton of consequential things, not too many things that you should really that should hold a lot of water, so to speak. There are a couple compelling storylines, though, that I think a lot of people should pay attention to. Among them, the developing relationship between Bryce Young and Dave Canales. I think that is something that a lot of people are interested in. Andy Dalton actually came by the podium this week during OTAs, and we just peppered him with questions basically about the growing bond between Canales and Bryce. And so that was interesting to get his side of the story. Andy was smart and cautious with his words, basically saying, hey, we don't know what this year is going to hold, but Bryce is set up to be good. And I think that's about as positive as you can be at this point in the season when it comes to that relationship. And I mean, let's be clear, so much of Dave Canales' first shot as head coach rests on the former number one overall pick in Bryce Young. So much. And they need to not only be on the same page, they need to trust each other. And Dave needs to do what he's done in other situations with other quarterbacks. He needs to find a way to make Bryce a Baker Mayfield sort of situation and rejuvenate him. I mean, of course, Bryce is one season in. We all have our prognostications and our predictions about our theories of how last year went so awry for this offense. But the only people who truly know are the people in the building, in the locker room, and so on. So that's really important. And then a couple other things are really important in OTAs too. Attendance is quite important, although it is optional. Seeing Eddie Pinheiro there, not seeing Jadeveon Clowney there, not seeing Caleb Chase in there is interesting. And then also making sure everyone's healthy. The fact that JC Horn is healthy and is feeling really good and is feeling free and is talking and is letting his bravado show like his pops used to do with Joe Horn back when he was with the Saints. I mean, these are all really important, positive things. But like I've said in the past, at this point in the season, good vibes spring eternal. Everyone's undefeated. Everyone feels good. And like Andy Dalton said, everyone thinks you're going to win a Super Bowl. So, I mean, hopefully not too many Panthers fans are out there thinking, hey, we're going to be in the mix in February. But, I mean,
we want to see progress, right?
Yeah, but the possibility for progress is there.
I like it. Yeah, I saw the article that you put out there with JC Horn. I think a lot of Panthers fans are very hopeful. Did we get a healthy JC Horn? I also agree with you with the just state of how we evaluate. Again, I'm not there, but from afar, I know there's a lot that people just want to gravitate to everything that they see or hear coming out of this. But it's so early, man. It's so early in the year. It's good to have some positivity. Good to take that over into mandatory minicamp. And it's funny too with the players that are absent. I would agree. I think we kind of, at least from afar, I don't know if you know, because I know you actually report on this, but I know from a fan perspective, some people are like, "Are we going to have a kicking competition?" We hear a lot of good things about Mevis and what he's done there, and then some other people like I feel like Clowney gets a pass. Like it's expected as a veteran that's been in the league. Like he's probably not going to be there as much, but I do think Chasen, that one's one that's like, dude, you were a first round pick that's coming here to prove yourself, and I feel like this is valuable time as we've heard Canales kind of talk about, the guys that are here, the guys that are working. So there was one when you talked about the Andy thing that sparked something for me too. I don't know who asked it about the pressure that got to Bryce last year and like if that impacted him, and like you could never really ask Bryce that, but we did get to hear Andy's response, and I thought that was pretty interesting for him to kind of go up there and say, "Yeah, I think it affected everyone." I believe is what he said
Yeah,
coming out of that.
that was Steve Reed of the Associated Press, and Steve was like, "Yeah, Bryce would never say this, but," and Andy goes, "And I will,"
Yeah,
which is kind of funny. But I mean, I mean, there are so many things about this team last year that um, when you're at this point in the season, like you need to pull from empirical evidence somewhere. You can't just
hmm
pull from uh, what players are doing without pads on, what players are doing like with shorts on when they're not even going in live competition. And so it's just what we do. We pull from what we saw last year, and that was the probably a lot of people would probably say the biggest hindrance to the offense was the lack of both pass protection and the zone blocking scheme that they use in the
yep.
run game as well. And and but I mean, we don't know the Dave Canales offense in Carolina yet, but we
Mhm.
do know that Dave is very intent on adjusting to his personnel. It's what he's always done. It's what he always talks about. And he says Icky is a mauler. This offensive line is quite promising. Went out and got a whole bunch of really proven interior offensive linemen to hopefully help out Bryce in the pass protection game. And so there are a lot of ways to say, hey, everything is coming together. But I was also that guy in training camp last year being like, man, can the Panthers win the NFC South this year?
Me
And
too, man.
so you gotta be, so, I'm trying my best I'm trying my
It's so
best to
hard.
temper
Yes.
expectations, particularly when, like you said, everything can kind of be like, oh, wait, Xavier Legette is hurt. Oh, crap. Like,
hmm
I gotta find a way we all have to find a way to temper expectations
We
and
do.
put everything in context.
I agree.
Yeah.
So we've talked about OTAs and then following up. And I know I've heard almost every presser I felt like this last week asking about the proposal to move around the off-season program, extend training camp, all that stuff. But we do, at least for this year, have mandatory mini camp coming up and believe next week. And I think Joe Person tweeted it was going to be 2 days instead of three now. I don't know if that's like officially confirmed or if you've heard any.
It is. It is.
Okay,
He was just reporting on a release that we got for our schedule. Yeah, it's just going to be
got
two.
it. So 2 days of mandatory mini camp. We kind of talk about OTAs being voluntary with mandatory mini camp coming around the corner. Like, is there anything that we're going to get out of this 2 day period, or any? I guess is the storyline, is Eddie going to be there, or some of these other guys that might have missed a little bit of time? Anything that you're like looking for as you go out?
Well, attendance is going to be really important, like you said. And also, one important thing to note during voluntary workouts, um, how it works is we request players to come to the podium and who we want to talk to. And during mandatory minicamp, we ask players to come and like they're sort of contractually obligated to.
Oh wow.
So like, I mean, like that's just, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, that's how it is in all professional sports, but that just
Hmm.
wasn't the case during the optional
Got it.
portion of camp. And so, like, it would like, I, I mean, I don't exactly know who we're going to talk to. It hasn't been confirmed yet, but I imagine we will ask Eddie Pinheiro what he's been up to, stuff like this. So that is something
Nice.
that's compelling and different about
It
mandatory minimum
is.
that I think some people are interested in. But I mean, I mean, with everyone there, the stakes automatically get a little higher, which is also more compelling. So we get to actually unpack certain things. We get to unpack like, okay, what is the running back room going to look like in Carolina this year?
Yeah.
Like all the running backs have been there, but like what is it truly going to look like? And again, Miles had this heel thing, so he might not be fully there. Jonathan Brooks, the second round draft pick that they got this year, is still coming off of like ACL surgery, so he should be ready for training camp. So, but that is something worth talking about and dissecting in mandatory minicamp. Another thing, is it time for the 2023 draft picks to have their
Mhm.
like moment of redemption? Them to say, hey, like we're still here. You know,
That's a good point, man. I
Bryce Young
think
had
a
a
lot
different
of
year
those,
last year. Yep,
yeah,
Jonathan Mingo had a underwhelming year last year, I think, and the Panthers went out and not only got a wide receiver with their first pick, they traded up to get a wide receiver, securing a fifth-year option for him. And then Chandler Zavala, who had an injury-riddled year
hmm
at offensive line. I mean, the list goes on. DJ Johnson, Jamie Robinson. So
yep,
that's really important. And of course, you might be saying, Alex, well, they were all at OTAs, but like mandatory minicamp is when the stakes are higher. It's when everyone's there. It's when like the coaches can actually truly rate what they have and truly take stock of what they have. So those are some things to keep in mind.
I like it. And the stakes are high, like you mentioned, and there's this evaluation going on. Do you anticipate? I know a lot of fans still think like cornerback position, Stephon Gilmore is like the name. I don't know if it's ever going to go away for some of these fans, but do you think like at that point, as we have this break and then until training camp, potentially looking at some other moves? Maybe. I know it's kind of hard to say, but
I do not have any information on Stephon Gilmore. I think conventional wisdom might have said, hey, the door has been open since well before the draft.
yep.
It's been wide open since Clowney gave an interview and was like, yeah, I've been texting him, being like, come to Carolina.
Come on
Um,
now.
so I don't. But I don't have any information on Gilmore. But I mean, one thing that Dan Morgan has said, the general manager Dan Morgan has said, is like you can only do so much personnel wise in one
Yep.
offseason,
So
and
true.
and some could argue that he's done a lot. He's gotten some
Hmm.
weapons for Bryce Young. He drafted the tight end of the future. He drafted um, someone in the backfield who will be really important. Drafted a wide receiver, like I said. Um, got Deontay Johnson. So there's a lot of like positive things. And they did replenish the defense a little bit after that exodus
Yep.
during free agency. So Clowney among those guys. So you can only do so much in one off season. Don't know how many more moves are going to be made, like when we're talking like huge splashes at
Yep.
this point. But it's the NFL. Anything can happen.
Sid, I agree with you. I think a lot of times that I'm on here and I talk about it, I'm like, well, as fans, at least from my seat, I'm like, oh, we can have our view, but like the coaches in the building have confidence in whatever's there, and they're going to make the most of it and use what they have. So we talk about trying to keep our expectations at a minimum. And then this week we get the blueprint episode or series, whatever you want to call it. I think they're going to do two parts, but at least you got to see the first part. kind of hard not to get hyped after watching that. The Panthers team, social, Edmonds, whoever put that together, do an amazing job. Curious, general thoughts around the blueprint. What'd you think?
Okay, I'm glad you asked this, and I promise you I didn't rehearse this because this just came to my mind. Um, Mike Kay, my beat partner with the Charlotte Observer, was like clearly featured in some of the background footage of
Yeah.
this episode, and so was a couple other reporters. And I'm out here in the back of so many videos, bro. I was found in the back of this viral video that Vashti of Carolina Blitz took when Bryce and Mike were talking, and Bryce was like, "Oh, what'd you do to your arm when you having surgery?"
Yeah.
I was
I
in the
remember
back of
that.
that, and
Yeah.
so that's cool. And then I also made myself look like a goofball when I was at a NASCAR race the week before.
Mm.
And I like there was a huge fight, and I was just like in the background being like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on?" So I find my way into the
Oh my
background.
God.
Yeah, I found my way into the background of all of these well, I mean, just two, but in a couple of
Yeah.
these like funny moments, and I'm not looking my best. But
Oh
like,
God.
of course, when Mike's in the background of an awesome interview with Dave, he looks like a G, and he looks
Hmm.
awesome, and
Yep.
and and I'm right next to him.
Oh
Where's
God.
Alex? Where's Alex's cameo? I'm gonna need to talk to the video people over at
That's
Camp.
right, man. So
Okay, but
yeah, go
anyway,
ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good. So I got to stop only because I carry over to NASCAR a little bit. Was it the Stenhouse fight?
Oh my gosh, yeah, Stenhouse and
Oh, I
Power.
got to go back and watch this. I got
No,
to go
no,
back
you
to
really don't, though. You really don't.
You're like, please don't. So only because my in-laws are huge NASCAR fans, they're going to get a kick out of it. I'm like, hey, let's go back and watch that video. I just did an interview with him. Of
Yeah,
course,
I
he's
probably
like,
shouldn't have brought attention to it, but I couldn't resist.
oh, that's great, man. That's good. Sorry. So yeah, back to the series
But
itself. What'd you think?
yeah, no, but outside of Alex's lack of credits at the end, I thought it was like amazing fodder.
Yeah.
It was amazingly done. I think as well. One surprise, or not necessarily surprise, but one thing that they really focused in on that was interesting to me was the relationship between Dave Canales and Dan Morgan, and they really hit on Dan's history with Carolina, which
They
is
did.
some might say like, okay, yeah, obviously, and y'all probably had some. There was probably some similar things with Frank Reich last year in that blueprint episode of him being the first quarterback for the franchise and stuff like this. But like the Dan Morgan and Dave Canales sort of thing, they got a lot of really awesome sound bites and awesome like moments of them together. And Dave is like in the episode, he's smitten with working with Dan. And they literally, I didn't realize this, they literally shared a wall when they were working in Seattle together, which is super interesting.
That is.
That was interesting. That was an interesting little tidbit from Blueprint. Interviewed a lot of people. Interviewed EJ Evero. Interviewed Derek Brown. No interview of Bryce Young, which was
Yeah.
kind of interesting. I don't know if people. I wasn't on my timeline at that point. I don't know if Panthers Twitter was freaking out about that or anything, but I thought that was interesting. But I mean, it's just like sports are just they're so good for your soul. Well, it depends on if it's what you consider good, but like
Yeah.
they certainly can make you feel a certain way, and it's just and like I applaud the media people over there. It's really good.
Yeah. They did a great job. And speaking of like tugging at your soul, I was listening to like our local sports radio today, and
Yeah.
they asked a question: if you could have all your favorite teams win their like championship this like in one calendar year, and then they never could win again, like would you choose to do that? And I was like, I don't know, man. That's because like it'd be fun to win everything, but then to think about like the rest of your life, they're never going to win. It's just like even just having a chance and knowing that it's possible.
No,
So
the
like
hope's the best part.
it's hope. It's all it is. Hope always,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, I wouldn't
It is.
I wouldn't take that at all. And also, you wouldn't want all of them jam packed into one year because
It's
then
true, man.
then you won't be able to savor it as much. I mean,
It's too much. Like,
the
dang,
the
move on to
Georgia
the next.
Bulldogs' first national championship felt a lot better than the next one.
Yeah,
That's just how it goes. And not to
it's
say I'm
so
a Georgia
true.
football fan because I'm not, but like that's just what it was. I mean, like,
Yep.
uh, not to get personal or anything, but like, my grandpa died in 2005. Huge Chicago White Sox fan. He got to see the White Sox win a World Series.
That's
Like
big.
after not doing that forever. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what sports are. So
that's it, man. It's great. So we talk about blueprint. I've got stadium renovations. This is part of the reason I was like, I could dive into this, but you've done a fantastic job. And I may not remember who's been writing some of this with you. So if you want to shout them out, you've done a lot of great work on the Charlotte Observer, highlighting the renovation plans. I know there's a lot of moving parts, even though there was like a meeting, I think, today. Just high level, can you just break it down, like where things stand, where they're going next, and your, I guess, general thoughts or like what you're hearing out in Charlotte?
yes, absolutely. So some high level thoughts. What the Panthers are doing are basically they're keeping the stadium as it is. They're keeping their bones, but they're updating a couple things, and those couple things add up to be $650 million in public funding and 150 million in uh, 150 million in immediate renovations from Tepper Sports and Entertainment, and then that's in addition to hundreds of millions of dollars that that Tepper Sports has already funneled into the stadium, plus like hundreds of millions of more for capital improvements over the terms of the deal. Of course, I wasn't trying to get into money immediately, but here we are.
Yep.
And so this is a massive project. This is the biggest renovation project in the history of Charlotte.
Mm.
There are what is going to be renovated. They're going to put in new seats everywhere. So
Oh
like
wow.
every single seat is going to be new in Bank of America Stadium as in like in the bowl, not the
Okay.
luxury suites on the field
Yeah.
levels, in the bowl. There's going to be a social patio in one of the top corners of the end zone or of the stadium. So for people who have seen the renderings, it's that like cool like glass place where people can stand up at standing room and stuff like this. There's going to be a new video board right where the old Jerry Richardson statue used to be. It's obviously going to be attached to the stadium, but like that could be used for watch parties, say if the Charlotte Hornets ever get great and they make the NBA Finals, and
Yeah.
like the whole community can gather there, so to speak.
Nice.
So and there's a lot of fun possibilities that they can do with that. Also, they're going to renovate this South Lawn Pavilion thing. They're going to renovate the locker rooms. They're going to have security enhancements. They're going to update the HVAC. They're just going to like bring it up to 2024 and hopefully beyond like level of luxury. And they're also going to try to make it as inclusive of the space as possible for the community. That is their pitch and that is their goal. No dome, no retractable
No.
roof, which is a point of contention, at least among readers who I've heard from this week,
Yeah.
because that means no Final Fours.
Yeah. You don't get the.
No Super Bowls. Not necessarily no Super Bowls, but it makes it more difficult to earn a Super Bowl bid. And then, also, yes, high-profile concerts are coming, but like in the case of bad weather, it's always nice to have a retractable roof.
It is.
So there's that. I mean, I can talk a little bit more about the money. I could if you want. I don't know
Yeah.
how high level you want me to be.
I'm interested in the money side
Okay.
only because I don't live in Charlotte. My sister-in-law lives in Charlotte. I have a feeling we may have people from Charlotte listening, and just outside, I could see where people may be like, the public funding something of this magnitude. Where's the money coming from? Is it money set aside for this specific thing,
Yes.
or could it be used? People are like, oh, why can't we use this money somewhere else? And I know you've done a little bit of, not a little bit, y'all have done work on that. So yeah, I'm glad to hear a little more about it.
Okay, absolutely. So It is that $650 million of public funding. Yes, is taxpayer money. It is from hospitality tax revenue generated by taxes on prepared food and beverage sales in the city. So, um, money from those taxes must be spent on tourism related projects, which is according to a bill extended in 2023 by the NC General Assembly until 2060. So, if you could tell, I had to like write that down because
Yeah.
it's a little confusing. Basically, like to like communicate it as easily as possible. This is not a new tax per se. Like Charlotte residents and Mecklenburg County residents are not going to have to pay extra in tax per se. However, they will still be funding it when they go out to a restaurant and they have to pay taxes to that restaurant. That money will go into a pot that is meant that is like the hospitality tax, and then the city can pull from that hospitality tax for tourism related projects. And enhancing Bank of America Stadium is technically a tourism related project, if that makes sense. So a lot of business leaders, and I went to a press conference today where they were all unified behind one message. Yes, city council needs to pass this. We need to pass this. Like, we got to use this money for something. Yes, the city has a lot of issues, but like this money can only be used for tourism, and like it's a no-brainer to use this for tourism and stuff like this. And they are technically correct in that the money can only be used for tourism-related projects. And if that is what you take issue with, then you have to go to the state. You have to go to the state and like say, hey, I don't agree with that bill that was extended last year. However, like enhancing a stadium isn't the only way to use tourism related funds. And like you can make your city a more desirable place to visit by, making a park system that's beautiful for people to come through, for investing in nonprofits, for investing in the arts and museums and stuff like this. There are ways to do that that make Charlotte that would probably classify as a tourism related project. So there's that. And then one last money related thing. I really hope I'm not boring your listeners.
No, I like it, man. Bring it on.
Okay. There's one thing that a lot of business leaders have brought up. It's this idea that the economic impact of the stadium is like something that Charlotte cannot live without. They keep throwing around the phrase $1.1 billion in economic impact. And as a lot of economists, public research has shown, like that economic impact number, it's unclear how that is always calculated. It is unclear how many jobs, when people boast about how many jobs are coming to the stadium, it's unclear like the quality of those jobs. It's unclear how many of those jobs will be exactly brought to the city. Also, according to Mary Ramsey's story, she's our government reporter at the Charlotte Observer. She's done fantastic work reporting on like the money side of the stadium. Like she talked to an economist this week, and he was just like, "Yeah, these numbers are regularly overinflated because they don't account for the fact that when say a stadium wasn't there, people are going to spend their money in other ways, and there's still going to be an economic impact if you're not going to spend, hundreds of dollars to go to a Panthers game or go to these concerts and stuff like this."
Yeah.
Now, that is very true, and this is a very like nuanced and complicated debate. And based on what I've seen already online, and hopefully people are talking to their city representatives and like having important civic discourse about this. This is all very important, particularly when it comes to the money part of it, particularly when it comes to the taxpayer part of it. But there is something really important to keep in mind. This deal comes with a 20-year non-relocation agreement. And Charlotte is a city. I've lived in North Carolina my whole life. North Carolina is a different state because it has an NFL football team, because it has a franchise attached to it.
Yep.
There would be a an economist calls a psychological cost to losing this
Hmm.
NFL franchise. There just would be. Um,
Yep.
and so I think that's really important. And uh, Bank of America Stadium is like, it occupies an important part of Charlotte real estate, Charlotte history. So these are the debates that are going
Yeah.
on right now when it comes to enhancing the stadium. And people can be cynical about the reasons why they're doing it now. People can be skeptical, and reasonably so, and honestly, probably required to be skeptical when it comes to when you're talking about this much money in public funding.
It's a lot.
But like, they're just compelling arguments everywhere. And
Right.
I don't know. I'm rejuvenated by the fact that so many people are interested in this,
Yeah.
because I mean, civic discourse is really important. I'm kind of blabbering, but can you make egg salad of all the egg
Yeah.
soup that I just spouted out
No,
here?
it's great, man. And the articles that y'all have put out, it educated me because that was my first question. Is like, well, where's the money coming from?
Yeah.
The impact, like y'all talked about, the 1.1 billion number, the actual renovations themselves, and I think you hit on a lot of things that fans have been asking. Like, well, what about grass? What about a dome? I think the thing you said though, with them being here for another 20 years, is extremely important. And I agree with you. I've been in North Carolina my whole life. It's hard to imagine not having that NFL team, and especially the how much they're valued at one, but just what it does locally and for the state itself. So,
There
hey,
is
yeah,
there
go
is
ahead.
one other thing that I meant to mention, and when it comes to this discourse, is
Mhm.
a lot of people are saying, well, what about the Charlotte residents who never go to a Panthers game? What
Mhm.
about the people who can't afford Panthers games now?
Yeah,
Because, as I've written about, games are quite expensive to go to, between the
yeah,
parking, between obtaining a ticket, and of course, if you're a PSL owner and you want to have access to buy season tickets every year, that the access to season tickets keep going up. And like, the one-time cost of being a PSL owner is like super expensive, so you don't want to lose that. So the question of economic impact for whom is also important. Like, who is going to
good
enjoy
question.
this
Yeah,
project? Whereas if you like enhance a museum or whatever, that could be
hmm
used for the entire public. I think that's an important point as well that I neglected to mention, and so I wanted to add that in there. But
that's
okay,
great.
sorry, go ahead. What were you about to say? You were going to talk about the grass or something?
Oh yeah, no, I was gonna say you kind of hit on it. I appreciate you giving the insight to me and everyone else on just like the actual issues that are surrounding it, because they're being talked about for sure. I was just gonna say, so like with this, I know some fans were like, "Oh, we don't even get grass," which I know that's more of a NFL or Panthers thing where we want a grass field. The dome you talked about. But I was just saying that I do think it's important to keep the Panthers here, which is like part of this. Also throwing in, I know there's also the like whole project with the practice facility. It's a lot of stuff happening, man. So I will say, if you're a Panthers fan and you want to be up to date, there's no better source than the Charlotte Observer with Alex, Mike, the rest of the team there that will keep you updated as this thing moves, because it is going to take years to do if it does get passed. But I know there's going to be a lot of steps to go through, and they can keep you informed along the way with that. That was
Appreciate
great, man. Cool. Well, wrapping up this episode, this was a fun one for me to pull, only because as a for me, I'm a content creator, but you're a writer working, and we see this Adam Thielen quote just explode the other day, talking about facilities and renovations. I was just curious, like, what is that like to see? Only because, like, I see you post it, and then, like, 5-10 minutes, I don't know if it was that fast, but it's like everywhere, and people are reposting it. They're sometimes clipping you out, which I know that's the thing that I don't like, give you credit for pulling this stuff together. But I just wanted to know what that was, how often that happens with, the stuff that you produce, or what that feeling's like.
Yeah. Um, well, so your question about how often does this happen is interesting. It actually happened last year once for me as well
Okay.
when it comes to, and it happens all the time, but in this particular way, where an
Mhm.
athlete says something on the record that either I'm only there for, or like another journalist is only there for, and then they put it out into the world. Last season, if you remember, it was after the Detroit Lions game, the Panthers lost, and
Mhm.
Terrace Marshall didn't play. He didn't get a snap.
Yeah.
And this was the week after he notched a team high 9 receptions, I believe.
Mhm.
And Jonathan Mingo comes back against the Lions, and and Terrace never saw the field. And so that Monday presser where we download our questions to Frank, and he responds to them after watching film, and then we get an open locker session. I asked Frank after that game, why didn't Terrace Marshall play? Frank takes the blame essentially and says he should have played. And
Mhm.
then I go to the locker room, and I was the only one who talked to Terrace, and Terrace was professional, and he was honest, and he said,
Mhm.
"I do not know why I didn't play. I don't really want to get into it too much, but I was surprised that I didn't play." And
Mhm.
he said some variation of that, and I was like, okay, and I was the only person to talk to him and approach him about that. And I wrote up that story, and that was one of those stories where that everyone kind
Wow.
of used that quote and was like, Terrace Marshall has, and of course and it's so funny. Like I try my best to like be as like to have it bring as much context to everything as possible,
Right.
like truly like paint the picture of what's going on.
Mhm.
And of course, you see a headline that says Terrace Marshall has no clue why he didn't play.
Just Adam. Yeah, that's
So,
wild, man.
which is difficult, but I mean that is the job, and they are professional athletes, and so when it comes to that, and telling the story about Adam, hopefully I'm not getting too long winded here, but Adam Thielen plays in a celebrity golf tournament every year, and he's a fantastic golfer. And leading up to this celebrity golf event, they the organizers had a media day via Zoom, and I was invited to go to that and be like, and just like ask some questions to Adam. It could be about anything, but I think the intent was to be, hey, like ask him about this golf tournament to get some buzz about the American
Yep.
Century Championship. And so I get on the Zoom. I ask Adam, hey, who is the best golfer on the team outside yourself? He thought about it. He laughed about it. He said, uh, Johnny Hecker's pretty good. We're still getting some other players involved. I said,
Nice.
okay, cool. And then I threw in another one. I was like, what about Bryce? Have you gotten Bryce out on the out on the links? And he
Mhm.
goes, man, the first time I brought Bryce to a the first time I brought Bryce to like the golf simulator, his swing needed some work, and like was like laughing about it. And it was just like it was a very funny anecdote that he said.
Yeah.
And so hopefully Bryce has gotten better at his golf game if that's something he wants to do. And
Yeah.
Adam said that was very funny, and I was just like, okay, well, Adam, I just want to say one quick thing. Some pretty big news happened, and this is my third question. So like everyone's already kind of annoyed at me because it's just like there are like 15 other reporters on this call.
Yeah.
Like, all right, Adam. Final thing. Very sorry. What do you think about the stadium renovation announcement that the Panthers brought out today? And then
Mhm.
he says, "Oh well, I think the Panthers. Well, I'm really excited because I think the Panthers have the worst facilities in the NFL right now." And like when you hear that, and then he goes on to explain it, and he talks about like how it's really awesome that the team is trying to invest in their players and their coaching staff to be the best that they can be, and all these things. And but when you hear that, like you just got to be like, oh man, I hate to do this, but I'm gonna have to ask a follow up, just a real quick one. I know everyone's real
Yeah.
mad at me on this call, and I just said, Adam, just real quick, what about what about the facilities do you want to see improved? Uh, I just want you to expound on your answer. I asked it more eloquently than that, and
Mhm.
he then goes, or maybe I didn't, but I'm pretty sure I did. Hopefully, I did. And
Uh,
he then says, "Well, it's difficult because we don't have an indoor practice facility right now." Which is true. The
yep.
Panthers had to tear down the old bubble at the
Bubble's
end
gone.
of the season to which is kind of the first part of like building this new practice facility that is still ongoing. They only have an outdoor facility right now. It's grass. Actually, where they are playing right now will be where the field house is in the future.
Got it.
The field house will not be ready for training camp, but it will be ready by this year. At least that's what the plan is. And so that'll be their indoor space, and then they'll also have an outdoor field right next to it.
Sweet.
But for training camp, it'll just be outdoor fields right next to each other, and they'll bring out bleachers so fans can see and stuff like this. So, but he mentioned that it doesn't have an indoor facility. He mentions that the locker rooms and the meeting rooms are something that they're dealing with right now. And I was like, okay, thank you. Appreciate it. And then I was like, all right, well, this is probably something I should type up now. And I took my time on it because I saw that there weren't other Panthers people on this particular call. And so I was like, all right, let's try to be as fair as possible. And hopefully I was, but it was one of those quotes where I was like, yeah, this is probably going to last a little bit in this world. So anyway, that's kind of the behind the scenes of how that happened. I'm sure that's not what you meant when you asked.
No, that was actually it. Like, I just was in general, how did that journey go? And just to hear the insight, man, like went into writing it, the questions, the way you approached it. For me personally, that's awesome just to hear the inside scoop on all that stuff from my seat.
I mean, I'm going in. I haven't even hit 12 months in covering this team yet. Year one, there was a lot of source building that went into it. But when you don't have as deep of a book as some guys who have been on this beat for 20 years or so, you got to find ways to still be like really useful and valuable.
Yeah, Andrew Lane.
That relies on leaning on Scott, that relies on leaning on Mike, but that also is a bit of hustle. And in this Adam Thielen case, it's a little bit of just like showing up and luck.
That's awesome, man.
And not necessarily luck, but just like doing a job. So that's just kind of how it happened. And
it's great. It's like every day you're out there grinding, because like I wouldn't have envisioned. I hear, I listen to like Mac and Bone, and so like I hear the ins and outs of Charlotte, and I should say I live in Wilmington. I don't even know if you know that. So I'm way out here on the coast, but to think that you could take a press conference for a golf tournament, events, and be able to get that, it's great, man. Because then you have this amazing story that comes out of it. So
I mean, and of course, this is another thing. Adam's a veteran. He has done these sorts of media events before. He knew what he was saying. I think that is an important thing. And the next day at practice, he was his fun-loving self. Nice. Also, Adam Thielen was also in the post-game locker room last year, if you remember, against Green Bay when the Panthers came so close to beating the Packers last year. He made a funny joke being like, that wasn't a catch that Romeo Doubs had at the end of the game, but that's what you get when you play the Packers. He's just a funny, honest person. And also something that I hope didn't get lost in the story was he was very optimistic about the renovations.
Yeah,
he was like,
I did get that.
I love the fact that this team is pouring into its players, its coaching staff. I know a lot of other outlets who aggregated the story. It's
missed all that.
It's unclear how much they focused on that, but he was optimistic about it. So
go read Alex's story to get the full scoop.
Yes.
Awesome, man. I know we're running late. You got some hoops to play. I know I've talked about it, but where can people find you? Number one, subscribe to the Charlotte Observer. Got to do it. But where can people find you?
Well, you can find me on the online pages of the Charlotte Observer. That's charlotteobserver.com. And then you can also find me on Twitter I'm trying to be as active on that as possible. It is at Alex Zietlow 05. But of course, I mean, you can also just like find me anywhere. You can email me, talk to me. Let's have some civic discourse. Let's figure out like let's not only figure out how to let's not only dissect and tackle the biggest questions of the Panthers. Let's change the world.
There you
Let's
go, man.
hit me up and let's change the world together.
Right here. This is fantastic, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, and we're definitely going to have you back. Got to bring on Mike now. But yeah, I think that's going to do it. Thank you all for tuning in.
Appreciate it.